And as sad as I am to say it, I think Kevin should be arrested too.
This is Matthew Franke, Kevin Franke's nephew. So he is now the third member of the Franke family to speak out. First, we had Ruby's sisters-in-law. So they are married to Kevin's brothers, Alan and Aaron. So Matthew could possibly be one of their sons, but I'm not 100% sure. I did already post an interview where they both spoke out, but we're going to touch on a few things in this video as well. Like you heard in the first clip, Matthew believes Kevin too should be arrested.
So at the very least, I think he should be brought up on neglect charges, because that's not acceptable.
And he states that he and his father have a hard time believing that Kevin had no contact with his children for the 13 months that he wasn't living in the home.
You know, he at least had to have stayed in contact with Shari, because he was part of overseeing her like her car and her student stuff at BYU. And so some of that had to have made its way through.
Now, according to Jennifer, who, remember, is married to Aaron, Kevin's brother, Shari Franke came to her and said that she was not allowed to speak to her father. Shari told us that Kevin was kicked out last July 2022. At the time, we never knew about Jody and the influence she would have on the family. At the time, Shari told us, quote, "My dad won't talk to me. He wouldn't take phone calls, answer emails, etc." End quote. She continued telling Jennifer, "My dad thinks he's a horrible person. They, Ruby and Jody, have him brainwashed, believing he's a bad person." Shari tried contacting her father after he moved out, but he blocked everyone on social media, his cell phone, and his email. So, according to Jennifer, Kevin was kicked out in July of 2022. We know from several media reports that Shari actually contacted law enforcement herself in September of 2022 after neighbors had informed her that her siblings had been left home alone. So that's just 2 months after Kevin had moved out. And in my opinion, Shari was probably trying to reach her father in concern for her siblings and trying to get help, and wasn't able to because her father had her blocked on everything. So less than a month later, in October, a caseworker with DCFS went to the Franke residence several times to try and make contact with Ruby and the kids, but no one would answer the door. So, in my opinion, I believe this caseworker probably tried to reach out to Kevin as well. Now, he obviously doesn't have this person's cell phone number blocked, so I'm sure if they left a message or if they were to make contact with Kevin, he would have had to have had knowledge about this incident and that Ruby was leaving the children home alone. So in that aspect, I agree with Matthew that there's just no way Kevin had no idea that anything was going on. I have a full timeline video in the works just from everything we've learned from the media, so make sure you subscribe and come back for that. Now, in Matthew's interview, he talks about how the Franke side of the family hasn't really had any contact with Ruby or Kevin, other than 2 years ago when he and his parents had dinner with Ruby, Kevin, and Shari.
It was, I think, 2 years ago when I had lunch with my cousin Shari, who I would like to add never spoke to me about any of this and never made any indication that anything was going on, and I really wish that she would have.
So that would have been around 2021. And we have to remember that Shari Franke is also a victim. And I don't think at that point Shari had realized what her parents were doing was considered CA. And it didn't really ramp up or escalate to the point where it's at now until early 2022 when Ruby joined Jody in Connexions. And Shari doesn't come out to speak about this until May of 2023 when she goes onto the podcast Into the Light. Matthew is asked what the hardest part of this has been for him, and he says the public perception, but obviously he's concerned about the children affected.
I think a lot of that perception has kind of been the difficult part for me. Obviously I'm really concerned about me. Because I've been thinking back on memories where like we have seen them at Christmas family reunions and stuff. I'm trying to think like, was there anything that I could have seen that could have suggested anything like that was going on.
I just want to point out that in the comment section of this interview, this is one of the top liked comments. Finally, a family member who actually mentions the children. Not a family member who saw them regularly, not an adult who could intervene, but a cousin. A cousin roughly the same age as Shari, and so far, he's the only one to mention the children. So apparently his family had a falling out with Ruby and Kevin shortly after he was born.
Kind of a falling out around when I was born. Ruby was really critical of my mom when one of my siblings was going through cancer, and she obviously wasn't, she didn't receive that very well, so that kind of distanced us a bit.
So this was a long time ago, right? I mean, this just goes to show who Ruby was as a person and her overall character. You're going to be critical of a mother going through one of the worst times of her life when her child has cancer? Matthew goes on to say that they always thought Ruby was kind of weird and on the stricter side, and Jennifer Franke, who's also married to one of Kevin's brothers, said, "Ruby isn't really my cup of tea. I've never really liked her from day one. She always thought she was better than anyone she's around. If you look up narcissist in the dictionary, there will be a picture of Ruby." Jennifer wanted to make it clear that her family's not affiliated with Ruby, adding that they have gotten a lot of hate since the arrest. "None of us Frankies knew anything about the abuse," she said, adding she hasn't seen Ruby or Kevin in about a decade. Jennifer added that the rest of the Frankies looked down on Ruby for starting her YouTube channel. Jennifer said the family heard Jody moved into the Franke house between 2021 and 2022. Jennifer said she heard at some point Ruby and Kevin started to go to Jody and her company for marriage counseling. It was a cult. Kevin was in a men's group at Connexions. He had a checklist of what he needed to do better, and if you did, they would praise you, and if they didn't, they would chastise you. When Jody moved into the family's Springville home, one of the first things she did was separate Kevin from Ruby. So that should have been the first red flag for Kevin. I mean, why does Jody need to live with you in order to be your marriage counselor?
So I'm kind of hoping that the book gets thrown at both of them, especially Jody, hearing like some of the things that she had with some of her previous clients about breaking like doctor-patient confidentiality and stuff like that. It's like she shouldn't have a license anymore.
Now, remember Jody had her license suspended in 2012, and we know that recently she has voluntarily given up her therapist license. But I just wonder, how many strikes does it take for someone to lose it entirely? Just recently, we learned yesterday that Mormon Stories podcast was actually served with a court order, restraining order, to take down Adam Steed's story off their YouTube.
Mormon Stories podcast has just received today a temporary restraining order requiring us to take down our interview with Adam Paul Steed, the courageous whistleblower to Mormon Church Boy Scouts in Idaho, and one of the many victims of 8 passengers therapist Jody Hildebrandt. We are not at liberty at this time to publicly discuss the details of the restraining order, unfortunately, so I won't be providing that here.
Now, originally, I thought that was a little weird that they got served to take his down and not Jesse's, but some people are speculating that it's because Adam speaks about his ex-wife in that video and that he's not supposed to talk about it, so that could be why. Now, I have this video posted. I actually found his Facebook pretty early on, and a post that he made. If you were not able to see his story, you can go check it out. Also, Hidden in True Crime did an interview with him that they have posted as well.
As far as my aunt, I think she definitely needs to do time. I don't know what the future will hold for her, if this was maybe just her being led down the wrong path, but she needs not be in public anymore.
I think there was a lot of isolation going on in general, from Ruby's side of the family to Kevin's side of the family. And while I do think they're going to try to pin a lot of this on Jody, I think they probably have a lot of evidence that this was going on long before Jody. Kevin's lawyer is definitely working overtime trying to paint the narrative that Kevin had no idea what was going on and that he's just a loving father who wants his family back, and that he was so brainwashed by Ruby and Jody that by staying away from his family, he was somehow going to get his marriage back. But my question is, if he's so brainwashed, Doesn't he also need some sort of therapy to deprogram from all of that? And is that really the best environment for his children, having gone through such a traumatic experience? We've even heard from his own family now that they agree he should be brought up on charges as well. That's all I have for you for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please do me a favor and hit the like button. It helps my channel out tremendously. I will link all the videos referenced in this video down below. And for more updates, be sure to subscribe.